Good evening, welcome. I'm Drea Summers. I'm going to be the host today. We are having our reimagining education through the lens of Black excellence. And we're really going to be doing a deep dive with some wonderful people here today. What does it mean to be a Black educator in Detroit? I'm honored to be among some great panelists, and so I'm going to have them introduce themselves one by one. We'll start with Ms. Lee.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amelia Lee. I am currently a middle school ELA teacher with DPSCD. I have 11 years of experience in education. I've been kind of all over Metro Detroit, and just like some of my other colleagues here, a couple experiences from paraprofessional to master teacher, AP for a minute or whatnot. So I'm just glad to be here.
Thank you. We're glad you're here too. Mrs. Peoples.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Dana Peoples. I am KA Dean of Intervention with Voyager Academy in Detroit. I've served there for 12 years now and just enjoy everything about educating in the city of Detroit.
Thank you. Dr. Scott.
Hey everyone, Dr. Scott here. Pleasure to be a part of this conversation and looking forward to gleaning some good information from these wonderful folks online here. I'm a native Detroiter, born and raised, currently serving as a climate, culture, and equity consultant with Wayne Risa. Also have 11 years experience in education. I actually taught for 6 years in Nashville, Tennessee, before transitioning back home and serving in various leadership roles across the city. So I'm looking forward to the work. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Good evening, everyone. My name is AJ Adams. I'm a third year teacher. I teach fifth grade at Brenda Scott, fifth grade social studies and science. And I'm a first year on board member, fellow. And I'm excited to be on the panel tonight.
Thank you all so much for your introductions. I'm excited to dive in. Just a plethora of Black excellence here. And so to start us off today, as educators in Detroit, what is unique about teaching here? What makes Detroit education what it is today?
I can jump in and answer that one. For me, it's how interconnected Detroit is, just being able to be in this network for going on 12 years and knowing so many different educators and being able to lean on them for, advice, share experiences, share students and families, just being able to be a part of so many different lives at the same time is amazing for me. So yeah, I'll cut it there.
I'm thinking Detroit history. Like Ms. Peoples talked about the interconnectedness. The Detroit history, you hear the term, everybody's from Detroit, right? Like literally, I feel like Detroit is in the middle of everything when it comes to like Black excellence and Black education. Like there's so many people who have come through, through Detroit schools that have made an impact on, Black lives altogether. And so just to be a part of that history and to see the effects of Detroit history and overall Black history, still within the schools, and we're still talking about it today, and we're still talking about it with our students. It's just something special because no matter like what conversations I'm having with my students, it always leads back to, what happened in the previous years or yesteryears or whatnot. Like there is no getting away. Like when you teach here, you're part of history. You're on the shoulders of the most famous educators that's from the city. Like it's nothing better than that. So yeah.
I love that. I think that is so true. You think about all the dope people that are either from the D or who live in the D or who claim the D. Detroit is a special place. It's nothing like it. There's nowhere that is, you're talking about 80% Black. You got Motown, you got the history of the auto industry, you have just this rich, vibrant historical place that is like none other in this country. And so it's really an honor to not only say that I'm from the city, but that I can contribute to educating the young minds coming up from the D, and really exposing them to not only what Detroit is all about educationally, but giving them a view of what Detroit was. That I'm not sure everyone follows that Instagram page, Black Detroiters, and you got the historian Jamon Jordan. Just really, really cool people have started to really dig into the stories of the D to celebrate not just the Rosa Parks and the Winans families, but the head coach of the New Orleans Pelicans in the NBA is Willie Green. He went to Cooley. Like, people don't know those dope stories. And so just kind of exposing people to new information is really, really cool. And uplifting the D in the process is always great.
And if I can get in here on the history, I think I'm the only panelist that's not a Detroiter. I've been teaching in Detroit for 3 years, and I came from California to teach in Detroit. And just thinking about this question, I was thinking that the history of Detroit is unique, and Detroit has been a titan, right, historically. And when titans fall, they fall slow and they fall hard. And I think understanding that part of history and understanding that for so long there's been a rebuild, and that we play such an important part of the rebuild in that understanding of Detroit, that history allows me to feel like it gives me the mindset to teach in Detroit. I mean, the history is unique. You have to be unique to stay in it. I know that in my 3rd year, but appreciating the history, I think, will keep you here if you think about it.
Wow, thank you all so much. Like, it reminds me, this saying, like, history lives. And as an educator myself in Detroit, like, I see and I hear your stories and that connectedness of, what we've been, what the city has experienced. It impacts our students today, and we build so much community and resiliency and like love around that. A celebration of the city, our spirit, and the resiliency, and just appreciating self. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that. So it's Black History Month. Happy February. It's been a great time always learning new facts, new things, people making songs on TikTok. My mom sent me a TikTok of like a Black history rap. She's like, just for your class. I said, they love music. So how does your racial identity impact how you show up at work?
I'll jump in on that one. For me in particular, there has been, it's no secret that there's a shortage of Black males in education, right? In my role, I'm uniquely the only Black male millennial Detroiter in my space. So I have the unique lens of not only relating directly to our kids, but also providing a unique perspective of helping them understand. We talked about the history of our people. Our people have struggled and endured quite a bit, but we also are influencers. We're influencers of culture. We're influencers of experience. We have endurance. We have perseverance. We have just the will to hustle and survive in our nature. And so coming into predominantly white spaces, or entering a field of education that is predominantly white female led with white male leader oversight, which is a whole nother dynamic and conversation. Coming into this space and bringing my full self allows me to not only relate directly to the students, but to also speak directly to their issues in an effort to have their voices heard when issues of inequity inevitably occur. Or when we're seeking to be proactive and find ways to incentivize them to make school a fun place for them to want to be at.
Absolutely. I second that. I will say that when I think about school, I think back to my experiences as a young student, and I had so many positive experiences that I couldn't tell you if I had any negative ones, because the positive way outweighed the negative. So I use that to think about how I show up as a Black woman for my Black and Brown students to make sure that I influence those positive connections and experiences, because we know a lot of times in most schools, our kids don't have positive experiences, and it tarnishes their view of education and leaders, which continues the conflict, between the teacher and the student, and the family and the teacher, and the family and the school. So I think for me, I just want to make sure I show up as that positive, role model, that positive Black woman teacher who can have a relationship with her students and be human with her students and have connections that are genuine, so that I can continue that love for learning and education for my students.
Just thinking about that question, showing up as myself in the classroom to my students, it's being very authentic. If anything, if you know anything about me, my students would tell you that I'm very real. Like, it is just being able to relate to them. Like, I'm from the same neighborhoods you're from. I've been to the same stores. I've been to the same places that you have went. I'm not this fantasy, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm not a person who travels from, a suburb coming down here to teach and going back. Like, I'm in the neighborhood, in a lot of ways, or I've grew up around this neighborhood. And so just showing up, being myself, just being authentic, because I feel like our students really appreciate that, because like you said, they have had a lot of experiences that, or trauma-filled experiences in the schools, dealing with administrators and teachers and whatnot. So just being able to show them this, this Black face, to my Black and Brown students, like, hey, I'm with you. I've been where you've been. I've experienced what you experienced, and let me tell you that, you can do great things in this life, despite no matter where you come from, So just, showing up and just being authentic with them, just by being myself. I feel like a lot of times, a lot of our Black educators go into these spaces a lot of times that are, predominantly white, and they feel they have to kind of be a certain way or whatnot. But at the end of the day, I have to remind folks that you guys are in Black spaces. When you're teaching Black kids and brown kids, you're in Black spaces and brown spaces, and that you need to acclimate to them. They do not need to acclimate to you. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'm gonna piggyback off of that real quick. I'm sorry, Anthony. This was real quick. I had this quick thought. I think authenticity is so important, but it's also super important to also exude excellence. I think oftentimes there's been a history of Black folks going into classrooms expecting, oh, because I'm Black, I'm gonna go into this classroom full of Black kids and I'm gonna automatically have their respect and it's gonna be great. And it's like, nope. Newsflash. And so I think being authentically yourself is important, but also hearing the kids and seeking out authentic relationships with them, wanting making them feel like they belong, creating a place of belonging in your respective spaces is incredibly important and valuable. And exuding excellence in a way that you're not just there to represent Black people, you're there to help them become better. You want them to lead better than they can every single day. And so it's just important to continue to push that and model that always.
I love this question. And I think I see myself in my kids every day, and I hope that they see themselves in me. And I feel like I have pretty close memories of myself as a 5th grader, 6th grader, 7th grader, 8th grader, and the potential that I knew I had, and in school, how much fun I had, right? So when I'm in the classroom, I'm like Dr. Scott just said, I want to instill in them I have the very same belief in them that I had in myself. And I grew up in the suburbs, and I grew up in California in a very different environment, with very different resources, with a lot of different opportunity, right? And my grandparents moved to the Bay Area from Texas and Louisiana in the 50s, and they very easily could have moved to Detroit, and that's why I've always felt kinship. Well, not always, but when I started to think about where I wanted to teach between Oakland and Detroit. And I very well could have been in the schools that I worked in West Oakland that performed the same way that our schools do in Detroit, on the east side where I teach, but it's the same opportunities for the same kids. They deserve the very same, they're capable of the same, they have the same potential. And that potential, I don't think that potential can be unlocked unless we're showing up, instilling that belief, showing that belief every day. So I don't know if it would mean the same to them if they couldn't see themselves in me when I stepped into the classroom. So that feels special. It feels like, it feels like a very special opportunity, and they deserve it. They deserve people to show up in that way every day.
I love that. Thank you all so much for sharing. Just the spirit of authenticity is so important in the age of social media and students having so much access to all this knowledge. And the days I don't teach as my authentic self, I just feel so off balance. But being my authentic self in classroom spaces with students just lets relationships build so much more genuinely and lets so much more magic happen to build that Black excellence. And thank you all for sharing just about kind of the current state we're at right now. And so I want to take our minds as we're reimagining education, using all this Black excellence experience and the wisdom of the ancestors. How would you reimagine education in Detroit?
I would reimagine education in Detroit full of equity for our students, like overflowing, too full, okay? I would also reimagine education in Detroit with more educators that are fully vested in our students, because I know just from being in the spaces that I've been in, people are in education for so many different reasons. And right now, just like the state of where we are in education, our students need someone to show up genuinely for them and just be able to be open and develop relationships with our students so that those relationships can grow over time. I just think making sure that our educators are in it for the right reasons would be a great way to reimagine it for me.
I can dive in. Um, I have a big imagination, so reimagine education is hard. Hard for me. Not really hard. It's actually fun. I had a lot of thoughts when the pandemic hit. I felt that was a golden opportunity to rethink how we educate our kids, and just an opportunity to be innovative and creative. And I think that was a missed opportunity because we spent so much time trying to preserve status quo, that status quo ultimately was dismantled. And now we're in this situation where it's hard to even think about what school was like pre-pandemic. It's like a whole new beast now. And so off what Dana was saying, I think she hit the nail on the head with focusing on equity. I think kids, if anyone has been around kids, they know that all kids care about is fairness. And that's literally what equity is all about, like creating balance and fairness in a way that makes sense to support, so that students with special needs and students who are gifted and students who are just trying to survive and get by can each leave with a quality education. I think that's like super important. Being from the D, growing up in the D, my sister's first grade teacher taught my mom in her first year of teaching. And so like the beauty of the communities that we were birthed from, I would really like to reimagine education in a way that kind of revisits community, in a way that folks can, like Amelia said earlier, like you can go to the grocery store and see your teacher. You can go to a local restaurant. You can go hang out at a local park or whatever and run into, educators. Your school can be a community hub where folks go to vote, folks go to have community conversations, etc. And so I would like to see that. And I'll also add, we have this really big focus on reading. And I think while it's important because folks got to learn how to read, I think I'll have to shift the angle. And if we focus on STEM and social studies, you can embed reading into all of that. And so instead of having a 2-hour reading block where we're just like hammering kids over the head with literacy stuff, I think if we center on fun activities and science and incorporating math and that, kids have to read the directions and learn how to figure out what to do, that there's reading involved there. And obviously with civics and history and social studies, really revamping that as a resource, I think would be a great way to expand education in the city. So yeah, I'll pause there.
I struggled with this question, reimagining education. And I know I struggled because I've been on both sides of the desk. Well, I'm a teacher, I've been an admin, and I'm a parent also with kids in the public school system. If anybody knows me, I'm a little bit of a radical because I agree with Dr. Scott that when the pandemic happened, we missed a golden opportunity to do something different, and we didn't. And we tried to return to the status quo. And it burned me because we are now in these schools. I'm teaching the school as if nothing ever happened. And it's the same old thing. And let's be frank, this idea of like the learning loss, right? It's this big, the learning loss, I called it a myth because, they gave out the NAE, the NAEP scores, in 2022, Black kids, I want to say overall, or I'm trying to remember the data I was looking at. I want to say overall was hitting at 188, right? And so the proficiency is 238. But when you go back a couple of years before the pandemic, we've always been low. We've always been low. We've never, as our Black students has never hit this proficiency according to this NAEP score, right? And so when we talk about reimagining education, we have to really start talking about maybe what we're doing is not the right way. Maybe what we're really doing in class 6-7 hours a day, like you said, hammering literacy for 2-hour blocks and having our students work out of workbooks and there's no creativity. Like, we really need to sit back and say, we need to do something different. For me, before the pandemic started, I was actually studying micro schools. And it's crazy because once the pandemic started, learning pods came out, but I was literally studying this. So for me, if I was reimagining education, obviously it would be more project-based, play-based learning, right? More authentic learning experiences, smaller class sizes, because you can't convince me that you really want to educate my kids and you're stuffing 30, 34 kids in there. Like, make that make sense. That doesn't make sense, especially when our kids have needs. This whole ideal of everybody has to progress at the same time, right? Like, I don't know about y'all, but I've taught students over the years, and we are always so much focused on growth. Oh, we got to make sure they grow, right? So yes, if I have a 7th grader who's reading at a 4th grade and they grow to read at a 5th grade level at the end of the year, you guys, he's still behind. We're still failing that child, So this idea of, I think we have to really step back and really think there are other models. I know there's other models and other ways to educate our students because they do it for everybody else. I just feel like our kids get the end of the stick, where we're going to put the teacher in front of the classroom. We're going to put this workbook in front of you, and we're going to put the teacher on a pacing scale, and we're just going to do this every day, because right now what I'm seeing is just our kids, they're so bright and they have so much more, but we're literally beating the creativity out of them. So when you talk about the STEM and, the math and science and stuff like that, like, that's literally what's happening. So reimagining education would be taking a step back. Like, there's a better way to do this, and how we're doing it now is not the way.
So I want to echo something there. Outside of Detroit, I feel like standards constrain students and pacing constrains teachers. We're creative and artistic, and our students are creative and artistic. And I'm sure that you can teach your kids, I don't know, maybe better with fewer restrictions or with more chance to be creative in getting them what they need. But within Detroit, I want to answer the question within Detroit. There's so much turnover in the schools that I've been in the first 3 years of my career. Right now I'm at a K-8 school, and I think the impact would be huge if, like Mrs. People said, there were folks who are in it for the right reasons. Sure, that is important, but if there were an opportunity for communities to develop and for, in the same building, for students to be able to come back and have relationships with former teachers who are role models who they can depend on, ask questions about as they plan for the future. Those kinds of relationships, I think, allow the environment in schools to be better, the culture to be better, and there might not be so many behavioral things. So I think that longevity can be built, and I think at Brenda Scott, at least, and I'm only in my second year at Brenda Scott, but there is an environment of not just like congeniality. I like the people that I work with, but I want to work with them because I see how they care about the kids, and I hear how they talk about the work and improving. I hear their frustrations. I see them get frustrated every day, just like I do. But I want to be at Brenda Scott so that my kids who I had in 5th grade, I can see them go to high school, and I think that will be impactful to them. And that's a change that I would love to see.
Ooh, that was a meal right there. Wow. From high standards to equity to staffing. Reimagining education is a multi-tiered, multi-layered pie, cake, whatever you have it. And hearing these responses, like, especially after the pandemic, the way that students have been just socialized so differently for like 1 to 2, 3 years of their life, and like with the returning to school, in-person schooling it's been a bear. So thank you all for sharing like such profound thoughts. And I was really sticking with the talk about science, social studies and sciences, because in my 4 years of teaching, it's been de-emphasized to not really like go in depth with these things. Like I had an education that was formal, curriculum, experiments, and it's just been so de-emphasized to get the reading scores up, to spend time on math. And what does that do for our students who cannot see themselves in like their academic future? So thank you all for sharing all these brilliant things. And so my last question for us tonight is, why Detroit? What brings you joy about teaching here? Through all the things, the thick and thin of it, 180 days, you come back every year stronger and better. And why Detroit?
I can jump in, and I'll try to keep it brief, but in my head, it already seems long. So like for Detroit is just a really big part of who I am, and it's ingrained in me. I didn't realize this until like last year when I was talking about school or college with someone, that I have literally received all of my education in the city of Detroit. And just to be able to share with my students and families that it is possible to, be here, stay here, grow here, exist here. You can absolutely move, nothing wrong with that, but just that it is possible. And being able to also work in a K-12 district where I can see my students from K to 12. I've had the opportunity to see my students from, grade 3 where I started, which was the lowest grade that I taught, and see them graduate from high school and attend prom, and just be able to like continue those relationships. Also able to work in a building where now one of the people on my staff was one of my students my very first year of my school. So just being able to see that growth and have that relationship change from, well, really not change, still teacher student, but I'm able to watch my students grow and be able to be a part of their lives and their life story. Also being able to send my daughter to the same schools that I went to because they're still open and still thriving. So those kind of things really bring me joy in the city, but most of all, being able to share my experience with my students and my families. Working in Southwest Detroit, it's very culturally diverse, and I'm able to see so many different ways of life and understand so many things that I never knew, growing up, so many things that I'm still learning about Detroit, like Terrence mentioned earlier with Black Detroiters. I'm learning stuff that I was never taught in schools, and I lived in Detroit, born and raised, been here my whole life, and just never knew. So just being able to open up those new avenues and those new pods of learning for my students, and go to the juicery on Verner that one of my students' parents opened and buy lunch, and just being able to share those things with my kids is like amazing. I don't know where else I would go.
For me, why Detroit? Because I'm obligated, right? I think we live in a time where, a lot of folks say, well, you don't have to do anything, it's a me, I type of culture. But when you look at past educators, like I said, when we talk about being on the shoulders of past educators, they understood that they were obligated to their people to help them to rise, right? And so that's me. I am obligated. It is my responsibility to come into the city that I was also educated in to help other Black and brown students. Because if I don't, who will? Because if I don't, who will? So why Detroit? Because this is where I'm supposed to be. This is who I'm supposed to be educating. I'm supposed to be educating Detroit kids, right? And that, that's just a simple answer to me, because I'm supposed to.
If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Completely agree with both of you all. I think that the D is the most special place because of its rich history and because it is the Blackest city in America. I don't take it lightly to be of this place. And I'm gonna just say this and be straight up with it. Growing up in the D for me, everybody that I knew was on a path to leaving. If you made it, you made it by getting out of the D. There was very limited success. Like success to us was like you made it to like Southfield or some shit, right? And so I think really taking a step back and looking at what we're seeking to do is we're seeking to grow our city and take charge of our city and plant seeds in our city so that we can sustain and grow our city for us by us. Is a mentality that I want to continue to push onto our kids. We're a city of hustlers. We're a city of thrivers, of go-getters. And I'm sorry, but I'll be damned if I let somebody come in here and take my city from me and my kids. Knowing what we have, knowing the genius that exists here, knowing that it's a place that can thrive and should thrive and would be thriving without systemic oppression and barriers created, designed for us to fail. And we've done nothing but continue to find ways around or through or under or behind or around those barriers and have continued to do nothing but thrive. And so while we have a long ways to go in this city and in this industry in particular, there's no other place I'd rather be.
It doesn't, I don't think it takes most folks too long to get a sense that I'm not from Detroit. And that's, it is what it is. It's all good. And I got the question a lot from folks. It's like, if you grew up in California, why Detroit? Why Detroit? Because of the weather. It's cold. The city's hard. It's tough if you're not from here. And I feel like I have to go into it a little bit. So I grew up in the suburbs in California, and then I went to a PWI. But when I finished college, I wanted to get back to where my family was from, and where my grandparents came when they left the South. So I started working in West Oakland, and I started volunteering at an after-school program, and I met a couple of Black educators who kind of shifted my whole paradigm. And I knew I wanted to get out of California because it's really nice, and I wanted to be in a place that I love being in Oakland after being in the suburbs and being at PWIs, right? I love being in a Black city. And I learned that Detroit was the Blackest city in the country. And I just began to think about it as a sister city to Oakland. I've been here for 3 years, and in a lot of ways it's not. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of important history to be here for. Detroit does, I said this before I really understood it, right? When I was writing my application, I said Detroit needs educators who are dedicated, who are tough. I had no idea how tough you have to be to teach in Detroit, and I'm learning now. But it's like the city deserves it, the kids deserve it. And it's an opportunity like no other, I think. So that's why Detroit.
Wow, thank you all for sharing such insight. Detroit has that spirit of authenticity and realness that is just refreshing and lovely, and just it's great. And in the summers, I love the good summer. The winters are hard, but we don't talk about winter. It's almost over, and the groundhog saw its shadow, so I'm feeling good. Thank you all so much for your insight. Thank you for sharing about your experiences and your Black excellence. I feel replenished and refilled from this experience. And I just want to leave the floor open for any final comments, anything you really wanted to say, any feelings you're taking away or things you're just looking forward to. I'll leave the floor open for final comments.
I just want to say thank you for, having us on this panel. It's always great to be able to share your thoughts and your vision, and hope that it influences somebody to make a choice to come be a part of what's happening in Detroit and stay a part of what's happening in Detroit. So I genuinely just appreciate the opportunity, and also looking forward to teaching third grade.
I want to thank you all for just this opportunity, to present a different light. Right now it's all about the teacher shortage and why teachers are leaving. But, you have a group of us, of educators, like, hey, we're in this, we're enjoying this, right? And we all, even though we all may have our different ideas of what we want education to be like, at the end of the day, we're still like, hey, this is the goal of educating our Black and brown kids. So it's just refreshing to see, others, like there are other people out there who's committed and invested in our children.
I want to thank Dr. Scott, Ms. Peoples, Ms. Lee, Drea, and Melanie. You all are so much an inspiration to keep doing it and find out what is after the 4th year and 5th year of teaching. I imagine that you're doing it for a good reason and that it's really important to you. And I hope that in 4 or 5 years, 10 years, it still feels really important to me. But thank you for doing the work. And thanks for the invitation.
I'm just grateful and humbled to have been given this invitation. So thank you all for even thinking of me in the first place. I echo everything that everyone has said. I just want to just lift up that I saw a statistic the other day in a meeting. I can't really give context, so I'll just share the data. But there was a conversation about how 23 our African-American students across Detroit are performing at 23%. That means that 23% of our African-American students were proficient on MSTEP. And so the conversation was directly around like, oh, what are we going to do to support our Black kids, this, that, and the other. And I'm a data guy, so I'm looking at the numbers, and I see the white number, and that number is 53%. And my question is, yeah, we focus on our Black babies, of course, because they need a lot of love. But if the white students are 53%, I took pre-calc at Michigan. I remember when that professor had the curve where the 53% was an A. So I feel like if you make 53% an A, that's a problem. So it's yes, the Black babies need help, but I think we need to take a broader look at the system that we're putting all of our kids through, and how they all are directly negatively impacted by these things. If we want to have some real concrete sustainable change to ensure that all kids have an equal and equitable and excellent education, I think we need to reframe our thinking. So just encouraging folks to fight the good fight, make data-informed decisions, Yeah, peace and love to you all.
Wow. And what a nugget to take on going forward. There's work to be done, and it's going to take the collective, it's going to take a united front to keep chipping away at this beast of a system. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts tonight. I want to thank the Detroit Collective and our chair, Melanie, for putting the space together. And all the kudos and thanks to everyone who put on this event today. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts, and please keep up with the Detroit Collective, and we'll see you soon.